You know that feeling, right? You spend years, maybe, in a language class, and then you're completely shown up by a 5-year-old native speaker. It is so frustrating. And it all feeds into this huge myth that kids are just these language learning geniuses, and that as adults, well, we've just lost that ability. But what if that whole idea is just completely wrong? This is the big question we're going to tear apart today. I mean, we see kids who seem to soak up languages like it's magic, while we're stuck with flashcards and confusing grammar rules. But is it actually magic, or is there something bigger going on here that we're just not seeing? Okay, here's the reality check. The real problem isn't our age. It's the insane difference in how much time we spend with the language. We're comparing our, 100, maybe 200 hours in a classroom, where half the time we're speaking English about Spanish or French, to a child's 15,000 hours of just living and breathing the language. It's not a fair fight. It's not even close. And this is the really wild part, when you actually make the comparison fair. When you give an adult and a child the exact same number of hours of exposure, the adult learns faster. Yep, every single time. And why is that? It's because we adults have already learned how to learn. We have strategies, we have context, we have cognitive tools that kids just haven't developed yet. It's actually one of the big advantages of being a grown-up. To really get our heads around this, let's look at the story of a guy named Gabriel Weiner. Because he, like a lot of us, was just totally convinced he was terrible at learning languages. And his early experiences, well, they're probably going to sound pretty familiar to you. I mean, just look at this track record. 7 years of Hebrew, and all he could do was read the alphabet. 5.5 years of Russian left him with maybe 40 words. So after more than a decade of trying, his conclusion was simple. And you can't blame him. He just wasn't a language person. But then, he made a decision that had nothing to do with learning languages. He wanted to study opera. And that decision accidentally threw him into this completely radical new learning environment. It was a choice that would end up shattering everything he thought he knew. So this was the actual contract he signed for a German immersion program. Just think about that for a second. Total immersion wasn't just a good idea, it was a rule with serious consequences. 1 word of English and you're kicked out. And you don't get your money back. Now that is some serious motivation. And the result of that intense sink or swim pressure? After just 7 weeks, this guy, who had spent years learning basically nothing, could now hold a real, solid conversation in German. This was the first major clue that maybe the problem wasn't him. Maybe it was the method. So that success in German got him hooked. But his next big breakthrough came from a moment of, total panic. He kind of cheated on a French placement test, and it forced him to figure out, in just 3 months, the real secret to making new words and ideas actually stick in your brain. Can you just imagine getting this email? He had used Google Translate to kind of fudge his way through the written test, hoping to get into a slightly faster beginner class. Instead, they put him in the intermediate level and told him he had 3 months to get ready for a verbal interview to prove he belonged. The panic was, very real. In this state of panic, he stumbled onto the fundamental difference between just memorizing something and truly knowing it. And to understand what he figured out, all we need to do is look at 2 different words, learned in 2 very, very different ways. Okay, so on the one hand, you've got a word like fényképezőgép. It's the Hungarian word for camera. You see it on a whiteboard, it's just a bunch of letters, right? On the other hand, you have a word you've never seen before, moktor. But we're not going to learn this one from a boring list. So let's learn this second word together. Just picture this. You're in some dusty old bar in Scandinavia, and this huge Viking-looking bartender with a giant red beard, he smiles at you and pulls out this bottle. And on the label is the word Moktor. He pours this thick, kind of greenish-brown liquid into a glass. Then he scoops something into it that, from the smell, you are pretty sure is rotting fish. Then he lights the shots on fire, looks you right in the eye, and he says the word Moktor. And now the entire bar is looking at you and they start chanting, Moktar! Moktar! Your friend drinks it, the Viking drinks it, and all eyes are on you. So you shout, Moktar! And you down it. And it is, without a doubt, the most disgusting thing you have ever tasted in your entire life. Now here's the point. You will never forget the word Moktor. But have you already forgotten that Hungarian word for camera? I bet you have. So why?
What's the difference? What just happened inside our brains? This right here is the whole secret. Memories aren't like files you store in a cabinet in your brain. They are webs, they are networks of connections between different parts of your brain. The word on the whiteboard, Finnyakepazo, was all alone. But Moktor, Omoktor, just built a massive superhighway of connections all over your brain.
Just think about all the connections we just made. You linked the sound and the spelling of Mukdor to powerful images, the Viking, the bottle, the fish. You linked it to physical sensations, that awful taste, the heat from the fire. And you linked it to strong emotions, disgust, a little bit of excitement, social pressure. That word is now locked in place by dozens of connections. It's unforgettable. Okay, that's a great story about a Viking bartender, super memorable, but how do you actually turn that idea into a practical system? One you can repeat to learn an entire language from scratch in just a few months.
Well, Weiner broke it down into 3 really simple, powerful steps. First, use a smart flashcard system, one that knows exactly when you're about to forget something and tests you right then. Second, and this is absolutely key, connect new words to images, not to English translations. So if you want to learn the French word for dog, chien, you Google image search it and use pictures of cute French dogs. And third, you learn grammar not with abstract rules, but with simple, fill-in-the-blank stories that give you context. So, what was the result after 3 months of doing this? He walked into that interview, had his very first real conversation in French, and the teacher was so blown away she said there must have been a mistake on his test, and she put him directly into the advanced level. I mean, it worked even better than he had hoped. And this wasn't some one-time fluke. He finally went back and got his revenge on Russian. Then he learned Hungarian, then Spanish and Japanese. He proved that the system works. It's a skill you can replicate, not some kind of magic trick. And that really brings us to the most important takeaway of all this. Learning a language is not about having some special language gene or being born with a gift. It's about using a method that works with your brain's natural way of making connections. It's a skill that literally anyone can develop. So really, the question to ask yourself isn't just, what language do I want to learn? The real shift is to ask, how can I make this memorable? How can I connect these words to images, to feelings, to experiences? In other words, what story are you going to create to bring that language to life?